Hello, everybody. Welcome to Kids Are Talking. My name is Michael. We have a great show for you today. Tonight, kids are talking about the state of the kids. And what a better way to have a show than to have a co host today with me, Will Haskell. Senator Will Haskell is here to co host the show. We're talking about the state of the kids. It's going to be an amazing show. So, without any further ado, let's get the show rolling.
Want to hear everyone's different perspectives and let everyone know that they're not alone.
Gives me hope for a lot of people because I know there's people that really struggle with
do things that you want to do to influence the world in the way you want.
Go out of your way to educate yourself by watching the show.
Everybody's always going to be struggling with mental health, yet nobody will know about it.
Kids Are Talking has given me an outlet to share my opinion and talk to people from all over the world.
Will Haskell, thanks for joining me for the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Listen, this is a great show. It's episode 33. Tonight, kids are talking about the state of the kids. And I mean, we consider kids here on Kids Are Talking, we consider kids, we have high school kids, we've had middle school kids, we've had college kids. You definitely fall into the head. I mean, we've had kid CEOs. So I'm going to call you our kid senator for the day, if you don't mind. No disrespect intended. It's only the
I wear
highest.
that as a badge of honor.
Okay, great. So yeah, so why don't you just let everybody know, Will, because we're broadcasting obviously all over the world. Who you are, just a little short introduction of who you are and why you're qualified to be co-hosting the State of the Kids.
Well, I hope I'm qualified to be co-hosting the State of the Kids. I guess we'll find out. My name is Will Haskell. I serve as a state senator here in Connecticut. I decided to do something really unusual when I was 22 years old. I was graduating from college. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do next, but I knew that I was kind of disappointed by the state of our politics. I think that a lot of young people can relate to that. And I knew that I wanted to do something about it. It felt like the problems that my community were facing were really urgent. So I decided to roll up my sleeves and to try to be a part of the solution. I ran for the state senate against somebody who had been in office for longer than I'd been alive. And nobody thought we would win. I was going up against a powerful incumbent. A district hadn't voted for somebody from my political party for more than 50 years. And I had hired my college roommate who had never worked on a campaign before to be my campaign manager. We bought a bunk bed and we moved into the only apartment we could afford. And we just started knocking on doors. And it's been a real adventure ever since. I'm now serving in my second term. And I work every single day to try to make sure that young people have a seat at the table as decisions are made. Because every single day, whether it's at your local town hall, or your state capital, or in the Congress of the United States, policymakers are sitting around and trying to decide what the next 10 and 50 and 100 years of American life will look like.
And they are not even going to be around for that, right?
Right, they're doing so without any stakeholders in that future, without folks who are actually going to have to live out the consequences of those decisions. So that's why I ran for office, and that's why I'm motivated to do what I do at the Capitol every day.
Well, listen, thank you very much. I remember when you were first running, you knocked on my door. And I know my mom hosted an event to help your campaign. So I'm so glad that was successful. I'm so glad to hear, the voice of young people being part of our government, of our state. And I just want to know, what was it like walking into the chamber that first day after you got elected, knowing that you're the youngest guy you're the youngest guy in the room? Like, was there a lot of disrespect? Did you feel intimidated?
Honestly, Michael, it was terrifying. I represent a district of about 100,000 people, and the majority of them had decided to elect me, but only barely. There were thousands, tens of thousands of people who didn't think that I was up for this job. And honestly, I wasn't quite sure myself. Here's what I figured out eventually, though. It's true. I don't know what it's like to start a small business. I don't know what it's like to take out a mortgage. I don't know what it's like to deal with, thank God, the declining health of my elderly parents. But I bring a different set of experiences. I bring a perspective that I thought was maybe missing from that room. I know what it's like to participate in school shooter drills. I know how hard it is to afford a degree in the 21st century. I know how hard it is to afford a rent. I'm the only renter in the Connecticut State Senate, and 34% of Connecticut households are rented. Surely those folks deserve a representative as well.
Mhm.
Anyways, all of us have to spend more time listening than talking in politics, right? We can't all be experts on every issue,
Right.
but I tried to bring to the table something different, something that a perspective that maybe was missing in our representative democracy.
Hopefully that you did. I mean, I think you definitely brought a lot of diversity. You brought a lot of perspective to the table. So what do you think? I mean, I invited you on to talk about the state of the kids. I'm sure that everyone knows the State of the Union. Everyone's heard the State of the State. We're doing the State of the Kids. I don't know what that means to you, but what do you think is the state of the kids, and what do you think is the number one political or policy issue that's either negatively or positively affecting the state of the kids today?
Oh my gosh, there's so much to unpack there, and I don't want to preempt the conversation because really I
I know and I do also want to let you know that the kids have come prepared with questions and opinions, so I don't want to override them. I know there's a lot that they want to talk about as well, but just briefly.
Absolutely. Well, most importantly, I'm excited to hear from them. A lot of elected officials, after they get elected, they are eager to get reelected. So they go to senior centers and they go to book clubs of retired individuals, because let's be honest, older Americans vote at much higher rates than younger Americans. A lot of younger Americans aren't even eligible to vote because they're under the age of 18. After I was elected, I made the decision that I wanted to represent all 100,000 people in my district. I didn't just want to cater to those who were likely or eligible to show up on election day. I knew that good ideas could become bills and could become laws, and those ought to be able to be suggested by young people as well as old people. I wanted to have a sort of a holistic view of my district and what they wanted to see for the future. So I made a rule with my staff. Anytime I'm going to go to a senior center, I also want to go to a elementary, a middle school, a high school classroom. And when I go to those, when I walk into those conversations, I don't just want to talk about young people. I want to talk to them. I want to take their policy ideas seriously. I'll just close with a. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Michael.
No, I was going to say, I mean, let's take that point and let's hear. I mean, because we have kids that want to talk to you, so let's talk to the kids. So let's bring the rest of the panel out.
Sounds great.
Yeah, we have William and Lily from Connecticut, and we have our returning veteran panelist Willy from North Carolina. So let's get everybody out here.
Hey guys, good evening.
Hey.
Good evening, Senator Haskell.
All right, I see 2 Connecticut people. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
So so let me just start out and just have everybody introduce ourselves. So why don't we start with you, William, since you were first to sign in backstage. So why don't you just let us know who you are and what made you want to come and talk about the state of the kids today.
First of all, thank you for having me. I am William, or Bill. I am a junior in Connecticut, and Kids Are Talking spoke particularly to me in the sense that it gave younger generations a chance to express their viewpoints, which are often neglected in a growing, in an ever-growing nation with people running it in the older generation. So I think it's a good way for the younger generation to become more involved. As Senator Haskell mentioned, that younger people tend to have a lower participation rate in general politics.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think is the number one political or policy issue that's affecting the state of the kids today? I know you sent me some questions and there was a lot you want to talk about, but what's your top issue?
My top issue is the lack of bipartisanship that seems to come from basically not only the younger generation, but every single political space that I look to, because we see politicians and people brag about bipartisanship as something to be proud of, when in fact it should be the normalcy within our politics. And I believe this lack of bipartisanship is something that greatly affects how we function, not only as a local community, but as an entire nation.
Okay,
well
great.
Well said, Bill. I agree.
Well, do you want to comment on that before we move around, or do you want to move through everybody first?
Well, let me just say really quickly, Bill, I agree. It's a huge problem that holds us back, our inability to work across the aisle. But I will say that while Washington D.C. is talking about problems, the state legislatures are actually solving them. I take just a few of the issues that I care a lot about: paid family leave, free community college, strong gun laws. While all of these ideas are kicked around and debated in really partisan terms in Washington D.C., the state capital where I work and where you're represented in Hartford, we've actually been able to bring all of those ideas into reality, which is really exciting. More than 70% of the votes we cast in the state Senate are actually bipartisan. That doesn't mean everybody from every party votes for them, of course. I have one colleague who just loves to vote no on everything, but on 70% of bills, at least one Republican and one Democrat are supporting them. And that gives me a lot of cause for optimism. And it doesn't make the headlines, and you won't see it depicted on cable news. But at lower levels of government, it feels like we're making progress here, and things aren't as bad as it seems.
That's great to hear.
Okay, so yeah, let's move on to Willy. Willy, welcome back to the show. Thanks for coming back. Sorry you were having a little technical issue before. You okay now? Oh, we can't hear you, Willy. You okay?
Does it have? Okay.
And now we got feedback again. No. All right. Well, you try to work it out. We'll pull Lily up while you see if you can figure that out. Lily, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. I heard you're calling in from Tokay Hall today. We used to. Yeah, Kids Are Talking used to have a radio broadcast out of Tokay Hall, so that's so special to hear you, see the familiar walls over there. So welcome to the show. Let us know who you are and what made you want to come talk about the state of the kids.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Lily. I do a lot of things. I'm a journalist, and I'm also part of my town government. I'm on a local youth commission, and I also participate in an organization called JSA, Junior Statesmen of America, which is a lot about like bipartisan debate, nonpartisan debate. And I wanted to be here today just because I think it's so important to actually have kids be represented in political discussion, very similar to what Bill and Will are both talking about. Just in general, I think when people see more kids actually participating, actually doing things, I know for one that I get inspired when I see activists my age, even people that I'm friends with, people at my school, talking to politicians, talking about politics. It makes me feel like I can also do something. So I think helping to talk about politics at a Kids Are Talking event means that if one person sees this and decides, yeah, I want to do that too, it'd be great.
And what do you think is the number one issue affecting the state of the kids today?
Pretty similar to Bill. I would say it's definitely a lack of crossing the aisle for their ideas, a lack of actually educating yourself on what the other side believes. Like, I know that I have my own political bias, but I feel like a lot of times people end up reaching their political views with a lot of not really actually informing themselves. They'll see something, maybe an infographic on Instagram or a video on TikTok, or just skim an article without looking at articles from a newspaper or website from the opposing side. And essentially they form their ideas about politics based on just a lack of information. And I think it makes it so much harder to have conversations with people, and even with people who I agree with politically, just because of the lack of information people tend to have.
Yeah, I get a newsletter called The Flip Side. It's an email letter, and it comes in every subject that they tell you about. There's a a headline about what the subject is, and then it says from the left, and they tell you what the left says, and then it says from the right, and you get the right side. So I definitely try to educate myself on both sides. I try to walk the middle. But Will, what are your thoughts on what Lily said?
One thought that jumps out, I agree that we We need access to information that goes beyond the headlines, and I fall guilty. I fall victim to this too, right? You see something on Twitter and you retweet it before even reading the article because it confirms your own internal bias and it makes you feel good. When really learning should make us feel uncomfortable, should challenge those biases that we have. So I love what you said, Lily. I've got one thought or one question for you, which is, you mentioned you're a journalist. Do you happen to write for Inklings?
I do happen to write for Inklings, and I actually have interviewed you before about vaccine passports. I cornered you at a school assembly.
Oh my gosh, I remember that. It's been a while. I forgot that. Well, I'm a huge fan of Inklings. I'm a regular reader. My fiance was the editor-in-chief of Inklings, so it's great to see you again.
Yeah.
Great. Willy, do you have your audios working now?
I think. Can y'all hear me?
Okay, great. Yeah, we can hear you now. So welcome back.
Good.
Welcome back to Kids Are Talking, Willy. Thanks for joining us again. What made you want to be on the State of the Kids show?
Well, I feel like
Oh, you're cutting in and out now.
Mhm.
We can't hear you. Your audio's cutting in and out.
Is it any better if it's on the cable? Or is it cutting?
Yeah, it's cutting out. Sorry.
Okay.
Lily, you know what sometimes
Yeah,
happens for me? I don't know if you're on your phone and you're using it like this. Sometimes if you turn it sideways, the mic has more exposure.
Okay. Let me
Then I suppose you might be
see if-
sideways.
turn.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Did that? Okay.
Yeah.
Is it cutting out now or no?
No,
Yeah,
we can hear
that's
you now.
much
Okay, go
better.
ahead.
That worked.
Okay. Okay. Good. Sorry about all the technical difficulties. It hasn't
Oh,
done this before. Okay, basically, like, you hear adults talking on TV about the state of the kids and how things just aren't going great for, like, my generation, but you don't really get to hear the kids' point of view, like the people that are actually going through everything. And so I thought it would be good to be able to, give a perspective from someone who's actually living it.
That's great. And what do you think? I mean, you're the only out-of-stater here. So what do you think is the number one issue affecting the state of the kids today? And is it different? You think it's different out where you are as it is up here in the Northeast?
I mean, I agree with everything that I've heard so far, but one of the things that I've seen prevalent a lot more in my community is just the lack of being able to get access to, like, care for, like, mental health, or just, like, it's difficult to either get the care, and it might just be my area, or I get that there do have to be some, like, you have to have parental or guardian consent, but sometimes kids that need it, they aren't in a place to be able to tell their parents, hey, I need help dealing with anxiety or depression or trauma. And that leads kids to not be able to get the help they need.
So the resources aren't in the schools.
Yeah.
They are some, but usually when things are bad, they legally have to contact parents and guardians, which does make sense, but it also leads to kids, like, not feeling comfortable asking for help.
It's so interesting you mentioned that, Willy, because it's the number one thing that I hear from young people in my district is that there isn't access to high quality mental health care professionals.
Right.
There's long waiting lists. When you finally do find a therapist, they often don't take your insurance. You've got to pay out of pocket. And then there's the very specific issue that you mentioned about a young person's level of comfort with parental involvement and notification. There's a young man, I'll share his name because I don't think he would mind. I've shared it before. A young man in Wilton, Connecticut named Vignesh, who reached out to me and said, hey, a lot of young people at my high school, they want to access mental health care, but they're going through anxiety and depression, and their parents aren't understanding or attuned to mental health care needs, and they don't want to have to share that information with their parents. And under Connecticut's laws, you can have up to 6 sessions that are confidential. And then after that, even if the therapist thinks it's a bad idea for her or him to share that information with your parent, they're required to under law. And what Vignesh said to me is, look, this is wrong, and it's holding people my age back from accessing the care that they need. This is why it's so important, guys, to get in touch with the folks who represent you in government, because I serve on 7 committees, and I wasn't aware of this particular statute. I didn't know that this was a problem, a narrow problem that needed solving. But when he brought it to my attention, we worked together and drafted a bill, and that bill became law. It reached our governor's desk a few weeks later, and he signed a permanent change, lifting the cap on confidential sessions. So now if you're seeking help from a mental health professional and you don't want your parents to know that, and the mental health professional agrees that it's not in your best interest for the parents to be notified, then you can continue getting the help that you need. And it's a small but important change, and it would have never happened if a high school student hadn't thought to pick up the phone and direct message their state senator on Instagram. So it's just I'm so glad you brought up that issue. And it's a reminder, I think, for everybody that it's so important when you encounter problems that could be solved, to get in touch with your elected officials.
And how old? So this was a high school kid. I mean, how early? That was one of my questions for you, Will. Is how early can a kid really get effectively involved in the policies that are affecting them directly in schools and in their communities?
I really, I don't think there's a minimum age for being involved. My campaign slogan was, there's no minimum age for being on the right side of history. A lot of people thought it was crazy to run for office as a young person. I don't see it that way. I think that the promise of representative democracy is that everybody has a seat at the table. And right now, guys, as you all know, our perspective, it's not often taken into account as public policies are created. So whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or something in between, we really need young people to step off the sidelines and get involved. And that's why, there's a sort of gross chat going on where folks are mocking the idea that students might have good ideas about public policy. But in all honesty, I do get some of the very best ideas for legislation from young people in my district who maybe they're not old enough to vote yet, but they're certainly old enough to have good ideas about how their community might be improved.
And what about you? I'm just going to call you Bill, because otherwise we have 2 Wills here. So what about you, Bill? Do you think your voice is being heard? I know you're pretty involved in the politics in the community.
Generally, I think my voice would be respected if we were to have a civil conversation about a political issue. However, in the grand scheme of things, we really have to look at how political parties are represented, or how bipartisan issues are represented within not just Connecticut, but throughout the entire country. For the most part, whichever party is in control of the capital is in control of representation, and the minority party often has to resort to things such as what's the word? Holding up. I forgot the word, but it's like holding up the majority from doing functions. But really, I feel like for my voice, at least, since I lean more towards the right to be heard in a grander scheme, we would have to introduce a system in which politics is not a game of winning every single desire or agenda piece that you want, but rather something that works to improve the goodwill of society by ensuring that people collaborate to make our society better than it currently is.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that may come to what you mentioned earlier, which is, the bipartisanship, and a lot of the times people agree to one thing because they feel like they need to support their party, even though it may not be in their best interest or something that they necessarily would have agreed with had it been a standalone nonpartisan issue.
Can I ask a question maybe to Lily or Whitley, which is, I'm curious, or Bill as well. Do you guys think that young people are as cynical as the pundits make us sound? When I watch cable news and they talk about young people in politics, I feel like they group millennials and Gen Z together. And I think that that's a mistake, because actually I've got older siblings who are millennials, and they are pretty cynical about politics. One poll found that 19% of millennials, less than 1 in 5 millennials, agree that generally speaking, people can be trusted. And that's crazy to me, right? I mean, they clearly are deeply cynical about the state of our politics. But the folks our age, the ones in Gen Z, we we're, I think, actually pretty determined to influence public policy for the better, right? We're following people like Greta Thunberg, who might be mocked by President Trump for anger management issues. We're following her lead by walking out of school and demanding action on climate change. We're following the lead of people like Emma Gonzalez by marching out of school and demanding stronger action on issues like gun control. So I'm curious if you guys share my feeling, which is that actually somehow, despite the fact that we grew up during the forever wars of the Bush administration. We grew up rehearsing school shooter drills. We spent more years indoors, more of our formative years indoors than we could ever imagine because of a virus that caused the worst recession since the Great Depression. Somehow we came out of all of that feeling optimistic and determined to be involved in government and not at all cynical like maybe that older age group. What do you guys think of that?
Well, I would agree with your conclusion that the Gen Z itself might be very involved, but I would disagree in saying that we're not cynical. I would think that, especially in school, every single conversation I've had about politics, someone always makes a cynical joke about, oh, well, yeah, the government can't do this, and everything is going awfully, and this is going to happen, and all these bad things are going to happen. And yeah, those are jokes, but they're reflective of I think, a broader issue within like our society in general, that we think that we can't actually make anything happen, that we're powerless to stop things. And at the same time, people, I think, are very determined, yes, to do walkouts and to try to protest and make change. And I think that's because people feel so powerless that they want to do something. I think a lot of it comes from not maybe cynicism isn't the correct word, but essentially just a desire to try to do anything they can in a world where they feel like they can't do anything. And I think because it's gotten so bad, we grew up in such an awful time with so many different like life-changing moments. So many people I know are like, I really want to stop living through historical moments in my life, And I think people want to do something about that. And I think that's where it comes from.
Willy, what? Sorry.
No, it's like opposed to maybe not exactly idealism, but more of a like a proactive stance from my generation.
Totally.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask Willy her response for that, but I think we lost her. So,
if I may add,
yeah, Bill, go ahead.
He has lived through several major historical moments that have allowed them to see the sort of darker side of American politics, and we are pretty cynical about everything that's been hurting our nation. However, we turn that cynicism into a motivation to try to better and improve our society, because we try, even though we might be living through a dark time, we try to look for something to hold on to try to pull ourselves out of that negative situation and turn and create an even better situation out of something so negative.
That's true, and inspiring, Bill. I'm glad to hear you say that. I feel like maybe to your point and to Lily's point, things have gotten so bad for our generation. We know that, climate change, for example, is going to pose an existential threat to our ability to lead happy and healthy lives, that we don't really have the luxury of sitting on our hands and purely being cynical. We might be somewhat cynical still. I think you're probably right, Lily, but we also recognize that failure to do anything could have really disastrous consequences. Anyways, but I appreciate you guys weighing in on this. And Michael, I don't want to, I'm sure you have other questions for the group, but that was one that I was eager to hear everyone's thoughts on.
Yeah, no, of course. Actually, Bill, I know Bill had a number of things you want to talk about. I think, of the handful of questions you sent me, Bill, was there one you wanted to address directly? I know you had mentioned you want to talk about gun control, and I mean, I know we did a whole show on gun control, Bill, but the one thing that I thought really struck me when from your email was your free speech versus hate speech, and the regulation on that on social media. I know someone in the chat mentioned that I was actually banned from live streaming on Facebook. We had to get another way around so we could promote this, because in 2020 I posted a joke about Clorox chewables. I hope nobody took me seriously. But Facebook saw that, and 2 years later they banned me from live streaming because of that. So what did you want to talk about the free speech versus hate speech?
So the first point that I would like to make is that a common understanding is that most of this regulation is coming from private corporate entities such as Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that. And the First Amendment specifically states that Congress shall not abridge or arbitrate the right to free speech or free political speech. However, we are in an ever evolving political climate, and the context of speech regulation, in my opinion, can be is very palatable. Like, it can be stretched or constricted to fit one's interpretation of what free speech or hate speech is. And I do believe that corporations have a degree of right to regulating what they might consider as hateful or dangerous speech that can cause certain harm. But what we also need to take a look at is the context of the speech itself. Like, you mentioned that you posted a joke about Clorox chewables, which I assume is really from the whole trend. But that itself, most people will probably know that it's a joke. However, in the context of regulation, they might whoever regulates speech on those platforms might see it as something advocating for you to go and like eat a Clorox tablet or something. So really, and if we look at actual rulings on this, there are precedents set, such as I believe, clear and present danger, like shouting fire in a theater or something. And if we apply that to corporations and social media regulation, it really needs, the context of the speech really needs to be taken into consideration, rather than just seen as something as I advocate for XYZ political platform or XYZ agenda, and you should too. And really, it's become a platform for people to silence one another rather than advance the implications of civil debate.
And Lily, what do you think about what he said?
Yeah. So I think I understand Bill's point. I think the larger issue at play is not understanding like, it's Congress itself. Like, this actually relates back to the kids that are talking and the youth. Congress itself is mostly filled with older people who didn't grow up in a generation with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, technically Meta and Twitter, and even TikTok, where they don't understand quite the impact that social media has in society, and that social media essentially has created within itself its own sort of governing body. It's its own force within our society, and leaders like Mark Zuckerberg, they essentially have the power of unelected leaders in our society, and that means that government is seeing them as corporations that they cannot regulate whatsoever, that they had to leave them doing whatever they can and say, oh, we can't interfere with this because that's interfering with a corporation, and our society, that's not what we do. But they aren't just like companies, they aren't just corporations that are selling products anymore. They have such a large influence. It's not even like a monopoly. It doesn't fit within the economic sphere that we've lived in since essentially the foundation of the nation, since the progressives, since we had regulations brought against like the titans. This is a new era of, it's like a combination of government and corporation and economic policy and censorship, and it's all these different things that are amalgamated within the issue of who actually controls social media and what power should social media have in our society. And I think it's just you can't discuss free speech on social media when you look at it through a lens of, oh, it's a company and a corporation, because as a company they can do, technically according to our constitution, they can censor whatever they want because they are a private company. But if we have Congress, and hopefully Congress with maybe full of not only young people but more people with more young people who have a perspective on what social media actually is, then we can finally create laws that can basically redefine what a social media company is, and then we can actually properly engage in discussion of how can social media censor people and what can actually be done, and how can government be involved in making sure that censorship isn't violating our constitutional rights. But it all comes down to basically having a better understanding of the forces in our life right now that come with technology and the internet.
Will, what do you think about what these kids are saying, and what have they been talking about in the chambers regarding these subjects?
Well, this conversation has been the best argument for electing young people, because it's one thing to say that we ought to regulate social media, that we ought to have social media literacy training, and making sure that there isn't the spread of mis and disinformation out there. But it's another thing when you look at, I think the point Lily just made is so apt. Who's actually in charge of regulating these companies? It's not folks who grew up online, right? This is another area where we bring, as young people, a unique perspective, a perspective where we might not all agree. We might have different lines as to where we define hate speech versus free speech. We might have different understandings of John Stuart Mill's promise of a marketplace of ideas and how open and unregulated that marketplace of ideas should be. But the point is, we don't have a seat at the table right now as those decisions are made. Hartford, Connecticut, where the state capital is located, we don't have very much jurisdiction over social media companies, right? Most of these conversations have to happen at the national and sometimes even the global level. So if you look in those rooms, you're probably not going to see anybody who grew up on Instagram, who grew up on Facebook, who has that literacy, one might say, with social media, and that's a problem. It's not that the folks who are in those rooms need to be replaced. It's about fulfilling that promise of representative democracy, pulling up more seats at the table so that there are more women and more people of color and more folks from working class backgrounds. And yes, as we've been talking about today, more young people. And this conversation has been so enlightening. I just wish it were happening in the halls of power as well.
Well, how do we bring these conversations to the halls of power? I mean, you're there. We're having these conversations here. We're streaming on Facebook. We're on Twitch. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. I can guarantee you that not a single congressperson besides you is even listening to this conversation. So how do the kids reach them if this is where they're communicating?
So here's my 2 cents on that, and I'm no expert, but I'll say that it drives me crazy when I see my friends on Instagram, posting and telling me, you've got to call Mitch McConnell, you've got to call Joe Biden, you've got to call Joe Manchin, you've got to call Chuck Schumer. I've tried. You're not going to reach them, I promise. Best case scenario, you're going to get a very polite intern who will listen to you for a few minutes, and you're not going to change the course of what happens in Congress, probably. You're going to maybe change that intern's lunch plans. But here's the good news. All hope is not lost. If you pick up the phone and you decide to call your state representative or your state senator, you're going to reach us on our cell phone. And if we get 5 or let alone 10 phone calls about a particular bill, that's going to change the course of our day. In 2019, I had the opportunity to help to draft a tax credit to help to pay off student loan debt. Connecticut is the highest student loan debt in the country, and it holds our economy back. I got it through the Senate, but I couldn't get it called for a vote in the House of Representatives. And as folks know, it's got to pass both chambers before reaching the governor's desk. Well, thankfully, a whole bunch of realtors from across the state decided to pick up the phone and call their state representative. And it wasn't hundreds and hundreds, or even let alone thousands. It was just a handful of realtors in every community who sent a text message, sent an email, left a voicemail for their local state rep. I was sitting in the chamber, guys, when this happened, and I swear you could literally see the tide turn. This bill that was at risk of dying, all of a sudden, we couldn't sign up co-sponsors fast enough, and it was because people took the time to do that personnel outreach, to do the hard thing, something harder than sending a tweet or posting on Facebook, something harder than writing a mean comment in the chat, something hard like picking up the phone and actually getting to know your state representative, or writing an email with a real policy suggestion. That's what we need. That's how we actually bring good ideas to the table and make sure that they're implemented as public policies. So if I could wrap up on one thought, it's just that I hope more young people decide to run for office. But if you're not yet old enough to run for office, I hope that you'll get involved in politics in some other way. Vote. If you're not old enough to vote, encourage others to vote. If you have a great idea, make sure you bring it, not just to the Congress of the United States, but get to know the folks who are representing you locally and on the state level, and bring your ideas to them. See if they might be able to implement them.
So, Will, I know you said you had to leave a couple minutes early, so we're not going to get a full hour, but I did want just to get Lily and William, did you guys, before Will leaves, is there any questions or topics that you wanted to ask him directly? Just now's your opportunity to bring those to light. He said, reach out to someone, so he's here. We've connected you. What do you have to say, Lily?
I think more in general, I would ask, how would you even find like the bills that you should be advocating for? How would you even go about pitching a bill to a state senator? I think for me, it feels like it's one thing to talk to you informally over a Zoom call, or to take my voice memos app and be like, hi, what do you think about vaccine passports? But it's another thing, I think, to like, even if I didn't know you, or if I was talking to my state representative instead, how would I go about like texting you or emailing you and saying, here's a bill I think you should support? Or how would I find the bill I want to support? And what even would I say in the message?
So I think it's the job of elected officials to be accessible. And that's why I'm forthcoming with information on my website about how to get in contact. In my very first campaign ad, gave folks my phone number so that they could get in touch. And I think that all politicians should do that from both parties, because our job is to answer to the people. We can't do that unless we're in touch with the people. In terms of specific bills, you can always go on cga.ct.gov, which is our legislative website. But honestly, the burden is on us. The onus is on us to, if you come to us with a problem, however vague, hey, I don't have access to a good therapist. Hey, I'm worried about the next school shooting taking place at my high school. Hey, what are we doing about the problem of climate change? The onus is on us to go and actually figure out what bill is relevant to your problem, how we might be able to solve that. It's really cool when a high school student like Vignesh reaches out with a specific statute that needs to be changed. But what's far more common is for folks to reach out with a problem that I can help to address in even one small way.
Thanks. William, what do you have to say to Will?
Really what I would encourage for is more general understanding of goodwill within, let's say in this case, our state capital. Politics, while mainly is for advocating your own viewpoint on how a certain issue should be tackled, really the whole point of politics, in my opinion, is to encourage the common goodwill of people to be a better person and be a better version of what you are currently, because you cannot have a society, an advanced society, without people who are willing to help each other or help their own society. And really they have to understand that in order for their problems to be solved, for their issues to be covered, they themselves have to take up a responsibility for discussing these issues. And that just doesn't apply to legislators within our capital, but applies to everyone within our communities to take up that responsibility to be a better person and take up that responsibility to bring up the issues that might be affecting the community.
I agree. Well said, Bill. And Michael, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure speaking with you all.
Yeah, thanks, Will. And just before you sign off, just in summary, I mean, what should kids take away from this whole conversation? I know you're leaving. You're going to be, I think you said you're going to law school, so you're going to be retiring from the Senate after this term. So what should kids be taking away from this conversation? What's your message to everybody watching?
Your voice is needed. What you heard tonight is young people eloquently explaining some of the greatest problems that we're facing and putting forward real solutions. And I wish I had some company up at the state capitol, and I wish that in every room where decisions were made, groups like this one had the opportunity to make their voices heard. So know that if you're thinking about running for office, if you're thinking about getting involved in politics and you're worried because nobody else in the room looks like you do or is your age, that's exactly why your voice is needed. And I hope you'll take that leap of faith. Thanks, guys.
Great. Thanks for coming. Thanks for joining us, Will.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So Lily and Will, I will give you both the same opportunity. Like I said, thank you for joining us to talk about the state of the kids. I know there was a lot to unpack. I know we didn't necessarily address all the issues, but for anyone that's watching, Lily, what is your message? What's your takeaway? What did you get out of this conversation with Will? And what are you planning on doing to take that information and move forward with it?
I think the biggest, I'm sorry, there's an echo a bit. I think the biggest thing that I got was how easy it is to access a politician and actually talk to a politician. I didn't realize, I knew that I could interview a politician as a journalist, and I knew I could talk maybe to my town first selectman, which I have before, but I didn't realize that you could actually email or message your state senator, your state representative, and that they actually are listening. I feel like a lot of the time, this is kind of within the conversation about cynicalness within our generation. I think a lot of people think that the people who are in power aren't going to listen to us. And it was really nice to know that actually it has happened, and that our state senator, and I know Will is a young state senator, but I'm assuming he knows from experience that other state senators would behave the same. That if you really did talk to them, they can make change. Even if at the state level is still important for change. So I think going forward, I would actually want to tell people that a lot of the time, and tell them if they have real issues, they want to talk about real political issues, that I heard from an actual state senator that if you talk to them, they will listen and you can actually make change.
Right. Have you tried reaching out to them? I mean, I agree. I think a lot of people, and not just kids, I think people feel like the politicians are almost untouchable and you have to be at a town hall or something to get that information. But hey, we heard it straight from Will that they're willing to talk. So that's a great takeaway. Will, what about you? What's your takeaway from today?
Really, my takeaway is to be a more proactive individual because, as Lily mentioned, it is very easy to reach out to a politician when you do it correctly. And really, if it's really right in front of us, then really it's more of a personal responsibility to be more proactive and take up that opportunity to reach out about a particular issue, because what Will mentioned a few minutes ago was that how easy it is for an issue to be brought up and addressed if enough support is garnered. And for at least the state politicians, that it is so easy to access them. So really, it's I think every citizen's individual duty to take that proactive action and call or mail or talk to their representative or senator about the issues plaguing the community, because it's like right in front of us. So we should seize the opportunity and seize the moment.
Great. Well, listen, thank you to both of you for joining us. I'm really sorry that Whitley dropped off. I know she had a lot to say. She's having some technical issues. I will give her credit. This was the first time she had issues. She's been on many shows. We've never had problems before, but hopefully if Whitley does want to reach out, I know Will is happy to speak with her, or she should also maybe reach out to her local representatives and make that point of connection. So, thanks again for joining us. Hopefully you're able to draw something from this. Kids Are Talking, we're going to have a couple weeks off, and we have some great, exciting new programming coming late this spring and this summer. So thanks everybody for watching, and we hope you join us again for another episode of Kids Are Talking. So have a good night.
Thank you for having me.